Annyeonghaseyo, welcome back to the Goju Karate Center. I have the great pleasure of hosting Sensei Noah. He is of the Karate Illuminati. I was very drawn to his work because of his prolific output on Facebook, on Instagram, on TikTok. Would that I could put out such incredible content all the time. I truly admire it. But also Sensei Noah, and I think because you, like me, are not super traditional, your lineage is really spectacular. You've got everything from Okinawan to modern. Would you please share your lineage and your experience with the Goju Karate Center viewers?
Sure. So I got my start originally in Shuri, which is an eclectic
Mm-hmm.
American style that was created by Robert
Okay.
Trius. Um,
Oh,
it
Robert
is,
Trias. Even I know him.
yeah. Uh, he's a big deal in American karate for obvious reasons. Um, and it is, although it is labeled as Okinawan karate, it is an American, invention that's more or less a blend of Goju Kai, Shindo Jinen Ryu, and some material from various other places that he picked up along the way, plus his boxing and judo experience. So I trained formally in a dojo in that system for about 2 years, and I got to Sankyu at the time, and then
Mm-hmm.
I moved,
Yeah.
which relocating and getting a new job and everything else meant that I wasn't able to attend a karate dojo for about
And
two
how
more
old were
years
you when you
after that.
started?
So
Yeah, how old were you when you
um,
started
I
karate? Out here?
I started when I was 18 years old. I'm a late
Yeah.
bloomer actually.
No way,
So
because I also
never,
started at 18, 19. So you look
yeah,
like
never
someone
too
who's
late
been
to start.
training since you were 5. Absolutely. Never too late. So after the relocation, what was your next karate step?
Well, I kept training on my own for
Hmm.
about 2 years until my schedule was able to change and I relocated again, the place that was closer to Karate Dojo. But during those 2 years, I also kept training in judo. There was a judo club that I was able to attend regularly, um, and I did a lot of research during those 2 years. Lots and lots of research and just kind of connecting with people. And that's how I came to realize that I wanted to learn um, older karate, something a little bit more classical in nature, and I wanted to learn how to use it in a practical way. Um, so that is what I started looking for. I decided I wanted to try Shorin-ryu if I could find it. So I looked around, and there were two promising options. Um, One of them became my late sensei. That was Richard Pogue, and he was a Shorinkan Shorin-ryu instructor. There are three main organizations from the senior students of Chibana Chosin who founded Shorin-ryu, and the Shorinkan is one of them. Um, and the other Shorin-ryu instructor in the area had the same lineage, actually, but was a ninth dan from Okinawa. But
Wow.
it just so happened that he was farther away and the schedule wasn't as good for me to be able to make it to classes. So I figured, well, I'll check out this American person first. And if I don't like that, then I'll make the other one work. But yeah, I went to Richard Pogue's dojo. I watched a class. I sat and talked with him for, I don't know, an hour or two after class. And yeah, I was very quickly taken in by his ability, his knowledge, his openness, his demeanor, and yeah, I started training with him. So I then took up Shorin-ryu until his passing, and then after. But during that time, I also switched from training in judo regularly to training in Japanese jiu-jitsu. That was one of the things that he had training in. So he taught classes on that for a while. Eventually, he ended up dropping those classes just because there wasn't much interest in them at the time, but probably another 3 or 4 years of Japanese jiu-jitsu. And in 2013, I informally started picking up Kishimoto-di, which is a rare shurite system, basically a pre-karate Okinawan martial art. And then I started formally training in that in 2014. So that is under Ulf Carlson, who is the only person to have a Shihan license in that art outside of Okinawa. And yeah, basically, I've just been sort of blending everything together as I've gone on. I still claim Shorin-ryu as my core system. Kishimoto-di I tend to teach separately so that I can preserve that particular art since it is so rare and at risk of dying out. Shorin-ryu isn't at risk of dying out. I'm not too worried about that. Um, and I've dabbled in various other arts, attending seminars, cross-training sessions, sparring sessions, with everybody from, other karate styles to kickboxing, Muay Thai, boxing, wrestling, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, you name it. I've kind of had the chance to train with or spar with some of these folks. And over the course of my martial arts career, I've competed in karate, judo, submission grappling, and MMA.
Wow. I have a very boring career. 20 years of Goju-ryu, 5 or 6 years of Aikido and Judo when I was a kid. And all of that knowledge and all that experience, and you still come back to Shorin-ryu. And the question I wanted to ask is, one of the questions I wanted to ask you is, how important do you think lineage is now in 2025 with everything karate is facing both on and offline? Do you think lineage back to the homeland, back to Okinawa is still important? Or do you think it's becoming less and less relevant?
It's important and it's not. Right?
Mhm.
There are different aspects of it that have value in differing degrees. So, on the one hand, your lineage tells a story of how the karate got to you, and it gives you an idea of the methodologies that you're more likely to have picked up along the way, right? Having a lineage from Itosu Anko, we know that he developed karate for the Okinawan school system. He made it publicly accessible. He reformatted a lot of it. He created a bunch of new kata, right? Anybody whose lineage connects back to Itosu, we know that. Um, and then after that, we have all these stories and interviews. We know that, okay, well, this person was particularly good at using toe kicks. This person was really, really strong. This guy could hit really hard. This guy was really good at joint locks. There are all these sort of different aspects that different people over the course of time preferred about how they would train and teach karate. And so that lineage tells you that story, and it can tell you what type of material you're likely to be training, the emphasis that you're likely to be looking at when you're training, some of the specific methodologies and philosophies, right? Things like Chibana Chosen said that you should have 3 to 5 applications for every movement in your kata. Well, not everybody has that kind of mentality, right? Some people don't care at all. So in that sense, in that historical telling the story of what material you have inherited, there's value to that. But as far as like having to have this pure lineage back to Okinawa in order to be considered a legitimate karate practitioner, I don't think so. There was a time when that was important, or in the early days of karate leaving Okinawa, you had to have some connection to Okinawa. Otherwise, how were you learning it, right? But at this point, we have people all over the world who have been training their entire lives. There are some of them who have actually legitimately inherited systems from Okinawa. There are people who are incredibly high ranks that people on Okinawa consider to be better authorities than some of the people on Okinawa. So I think it's been disseminated well enough that having that connection back is nice, right? And it's nice to be able to go to Okinawa and go to the Honbu dojo for your system and train there with the people who've been training it for generations. And that's very cool. But I don't think it's necessarily so vital to, validating somebody's martial arts experience.
I think that's really important to bring up, especially in the sense of American karate is, a lot of people look at karate as a monolith, and it's not. Karate is incredibly nuanced. It's been fractured all over the world. And I think with America becoming the second birthplace of karate with the GIs within Okinawa, lineage was very, very important back then. But now, as we're seeing on the internet with all these discussions, um, I have I love my lineage. I have a very strong lineage straight back to Choji Miyagi Sensei. And I'm, like you say, I've never thought of it as a story to inherit, but that's a beautiful way of putting it. Um, but as I become more mature and I understand more of my karate, I realize that lineage alone is not enough. Because a lot of people have great lineage and terrible karate. It's not like a magic elixir that's going to give you magical, beautiful karate on its own, but it helps with the foundation. So on that topic, um, do you, why do you think, or if you agree with me, that karate is having a little bit of a legitimacy crisis at the moment? You know, that only BJJ works and only MMA works. And we're kind of being forced to, I see in your comments as in mine, we're always kind of having to defend karate. You know, we had a bit of a moment with Cobra Kai, but that's over now. And now we're back to defending our art. How do you think this came to be that karate is, you know, like one of your videos that got a bad rap or seen as impractical, inherently impractical when, you know, anyone who studies it knows it isn't?
The issue that karate has with its reputation really stems from two sources. One of them is self-created, for sure. Um, the other one is an external source of this issue. So, on the one hand, a lot of karate schools did pick up the McDojo format of running schools and teaching that was developed in Taekwondo. That isn't a karate invention, but karate did take that methodology because it makes money. And, you know, especially in America, there is a big drive to take anything that you're passionate about and use it to make money. And so that money-making drive pushed a lot of people to adopt that McDojo format. And so they're charging a lot of fees. They're putting people into locked-in contracts. They're finding ways to nickel and dime their students. And they're not particularly worried about teaching good karate. And so that has resulted in a watering down of the art in general, and a lot of people having this experience with that kind of karate, because it's very easy to, you know, spread your school around when it makes a lot of money. You can open up a bunch of different franchises, and therefore you get more students in there. And they may only train for 6 months, but they have that particular experience of karate. And their, you know, parents and family members see this experience as well, and so they get this idea of what karate is in their head. That maybe isn't accurate, but it is popular. And then from the external side of things, we've got primarily the mixed martial arts community, both fans and practitioners of mixed martial arts. Over the past several decades, there's been a really strong push to delegitimize traditional martial arts in that community. And that stems from the fact that when the UFC was originally created by the Gracies to showcase Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, there were a couple of karate practitioners in there, and they didn't do that great. One or two of them did all right, but overall they didn't do very well and didn't, you know, win the tournaments that were being put on. And those handful of examples were extrapolated out to basically be representative of all karate and say that, see, karate doesn't actually work. Um, and obviously, we know that's not true, and there have been plenty of high-profile MMA fighters since that time who are karate practitioners and have done quite well. But the fact that the UFC was invented to essentially be propaganda for BJJ sort of set this in motion and got people talking about it in that way. And there has been a push ever since then in the MMA community to say traditional martial arts don't work. If you want to be able to be a good MMA fighter or defend yourself, don't bother with those. Train the big four, right? Boxing, wrestling, Muay Thai, Jiu-Jitsu. Don't worry about any of the other traditional martial arts. They suck. They don't work. And that all obviously stems from ignorance, right? They don't know anything really about these martial arts that they're saying.
Insecurity. There's insecurity because at the end of the day, we're all competing for the same students. You know, if you want your MMA place to grow, you've got to prove that you're better than the traditional dojo down the road that's been there for 20, 30 years. Like our dojo is turning 50 in 3 years. Anyone who comes into the area has got to decide, okay, well, tradition is the way of the past. The only new way to do it is the cool. I don't know when MMA is going to stop being the new kid on the block when it hasn't been new for like 20, 40 years. I'm waiting. It's like the Holden Caulfield of martial arts right now from Catcher in the
Yeah.
Rye. And, I don't think the problem is as much, yes, with the practitioners to an extent, but I think the fans are actually much worse. I
Yeah.
did a live
The
stream this morning and I had an MMA fan up in my grill. So, you know, that's what they do. They feel like they have to go and defend MMA like it's an entity in every single comment thread on every single traditional channel. I'm like, so what are you doing here? Are you hate watching karate? I don't get it, but I think the way you put it, yeah, that they had to delegitimize karate. Even though there's space under the sun for all of us, there's enough space for everyone.
yeah.
You throw a rock
And
with 200 students in a big city.
yeah. And it's not like I dislike MMA. I think MMA is great.
No,
I enjoy
no, I
watching
love
it.
the
Like I
idea.
said, I fought in MMA myself. And the big four arts that are popular and have become sort of the standard training methods for MMA, they're good. Boxing, wrestling, Muay Thai, Jiu-Jitsu, they're good martial arts. I don't have any problem with them. But my issue is that they still have this us versus them mentality that came from those early UFC matches that were intended to be style versus style. They they ignore the fact that it was purposely formatted to let BJJ win more often, right? They avoid discussing the fact that that's how the brackets were set up to try and make sure that the people with good grappling didn't necessarily end up fighting the Gracies. So it's a disingenuous example of style versus style, but they still have that mentality that MMA is proof that, those traditional martial arts don't work and only these do. And I guess they feel like they would be somehow lesser if they admitted that traditional martial arts have some value to them, even in a mixed martial arts context. But yeah, it's definitely more the fans than the practitioners. And when it is the practitioners, more often than not, it is the less experienced ones, the people who have, some actual fights under their belt have a tendency to be a little bit more open, in my experience anyway.
And unrelated to the topic, what do you think of karate combat? As like a oh, shoot. I've watched a couple of matches. It's a little bit gimmicky for me. The whole point was kind of to showcase the best of karate, character, integrity, power, efficacy, and instead we're getting like Bitcoin and weird graphics and a very bizarre ring and gold pants. So I really loved the idea. I was actually really hoping that we could have our own platform to showcase karate that wasn't play sports karate WKF. I'm sure you remember the debacle at the Olympics when the guy got disqualified. It was the only time I was actually embarrassed to be a karate person was after the
Oh yeah,
Olympics because
for sure.
it just showed how ridiculous the rules are. And I was hoping Karate Combat could be our UFC and our platform. Um, it's still around, so it must be successful to an extent. But what are your views on that as an alternative or as a legitimate expression of karate?
I am controversially not a fan of karate combat. Um, so I understand its intent, right? But it's no longer fulfilling that intent. The reason that it was created was, like you said, to showcase karate in a full contact format. And they did have a little bit of a gimmick with that pit design, but that's all right. That's a kind of fun, different way of restraining the fighters to a particular area. But initially, when they created this thing, you had to be a karate black belt to fight. That was how it worked. And as I recall, it was invitation only originally.
You
Um,
could audition, I think. There was like an auditioning thing at one stage. A couple of the
yeah,
people here were like, oh, let's audition. I'm like, sweetie, you're not going to get all the way to the States to go to Karate Combat. So,
yeah. But the thing about it is, they're acting as if it's this, brand new idea. It's really just American kickboxing again. If you've ever watched American kickboxing from the 70s and 80s, like if you've watched Benny the Jet uh, Urquidez fight, for example, um, it's essentially the same rule set. Um, they opened it up to allow more leg kicks, and they allowed that little bit of ground and pound. Those things weren't really allowed in American kickboxing, but in the heyday of American kickboxing, um, obviously punches and kicks of all kinds of different types were allowed, and throws and sweeps were allowed in American
because it's
kickboxing.
in our culture. Oh, well, yeah, in American sport. But for us, and I think that's the thing a lot of people don't know. They're like, there's no sweeps in karate, there's no throws in karate, there's no locks in karate. I'm like, not in my karate. My karate's got all of those things. You just have to know where to look. And if your sensei shows you the way and leads bunkai first rather than kata first, then yes, you will know these things. And that's, I think, one of the reasons why it's very frustrating that karate combat doesn't showcase that stuff as much. Like you say, it's basically American kickboxing.
Yeah,
I would have
it
loved to have
is
seen
just
it.
yeah,
Sorry, no,
it's
I
just American
interrupted.
kickboxing 2.0. They took American kickboxing, they allowed a couple more leg kicks, and they allowed some ground and pound, but it's still American kickboxing, which is based on karate. American kickboxing came from karate practitioners, but it came from karate practitioners who were doing point fighting, which was invented based on kendo. It was not actually designed for karate. It was based on fighting somebody with a bamboo sword. That's why it's the hit them once and you stop. If I have a sword and I hit you once, we're probably done. So it makes sense in a kendo perspective. Even down to the sweeps and throws that were allowed in point fighting, those were allowed in kendo. Most of them aren't anymore. Kendo's reformatted their rule sets. But back in the 1950s, when they were developing the point fighting system for karate, those things were allowed in kendo. So basically, when they invented American kickboxing, they took point fighting and said, well, let's stop doing the stopping thing and do it full contact continuous. Most of us at this point know judo to some degree, so we'll add some sweeps and throws in there. But that is such a small collection of material from the broader curriculum of karate, um, that it just isn't representative of karate. So that's kind of the issue that I have with most sport karate formats. They are all designed based on that original kendo idea, essentially, for the most part. They're all based on this longer range, striking focused fighting. When karate is really a blended grappling and striking art. So it doesn't make sense to set yourself back to long range and just do punches and kicks. And then as far as karate combat specifically, they've done away with the requirement that you are a karate practitioner entirely, and they're letting anybody from any striking martial art join in. And we're seeing these people win championships who have absolutely no karate background. And I think that is just a major reinforcement of the fact that it is not designed for karate. Because if it were a fighting rule set that was actually designed around karate, people who don't do karate would struggle to win championships. Right? But as it is, it's just basic kickboxing. So karate people, taekwondo people, Muay Thai people, kickboxers, whether they be American, Japanese, or Dutch kickboxers, right? All these different people can join in and have just as much chance of success because they're all effectively training largely the same material, because it's that's just kickboxing. And if it were designed for karate, then that wouldn't be happening. And that's kind of my big sticking point with karate combat. It's fine. I like watching kickboxing on occasion, but it isn't representative of karate, and it's kind of unfortunate that it's taken the stage as the sort of default. This is how you prove whether your karate is good or not. I think that Kakedameshi would be a much better competitive format, personally.
So explain that format to me because I'd love to learn what that is. And my next question was going to be, so what would be the ideal fighting format for us to really test? I mean, at the moment, so we used to have popularly in South Africa, we have a colloquial term called murmaka, which is just basically smash and punch. And they would put the very heavy protective gear on and just, there'd be two refs with counters and just quack, quack, quack. They just keep tapping every time someone landed a hit. And then at the end, they'd see who hit the most and that would be the winner. And it was a lot more like, well, it was brutal. The one mask we have in the dojo was actually dented over the eye because they just used to hit the head so often. It's there like a suit of armor. No one wears it because, there's probably blood inside there. But so tell me about the format Takema? Spell it?
Kakedameshi.
Kakedameshi. Okay. Teach me.
Kakedameshi basically translates to a test of hanging or hooked hands. And
Okay.
there are a couple different ways to perform this practice. One of them is actually one that you see present in a Bruce Lee movie. If you've ever seen the movie where they're having this sort of tournament setting and they cross wrists with each other and then they try to hit each other first.
Okay.
That is one of the formats that people can do for Kakedameshi. And basically the idea is from touching, you have to do whatever techniques you want to do, and generally get there before your partner does. That's not the type that I prefer personally, because that's really just emphasizing fast striking more than anything. You can do joint locks and takedowns and such as well, but strikes are going to be faster. And if that's what you're kind of looking for, then that's a little bit more restricted. What I prefer doing is a bit more free form and a little bit more true to the description that we have of Kakedameshi from Nagamine Shoshin, the founder of Matsubayashi Ryu. In his book, he describes Kakedameshi as being essentially a very aggressive form of Chinese push hands competition, but where you are allowed to strike and you are allowed to twist the joints, not just try to push each other out of a ring. You can throw each other, you can strike each other, you can joint lock each other. And so the way that I go about doing this is, okay, we're going to have our hands up and we're going to touch our arms at the wrist. It doesn't really matter if you're inside or outside, one of each, but you have to maintain at least one point of contact with your partner at all times.
Okay. Wow.
So you are required to stay at that arm's reach distance. All right. And you are allowed to strike. You are allowed to do joint locks. You are allowed to do sweeps, throws, takedowns, strangleholds. You name it. If it's in karate, you can use it. Obviously, we make considerations for safety in training. If you're going to do something that would be attacking the eye, let's put the thumb on the eyebrow instead of actually putting it in the eye. If you're going to attack the throat, let's just kind of go towards it rather than actually attacking it directly. If you're going to put a joint lock on somebody, give them enough time to at least move with it, and this format, because of the range that it forces you to be at, gives you the opportunity to work your kata application, which is something that the vast majority of karate kumite sparring does not do. Because, again, most people's sparring is based on that kendo idea. It's that long range, get in and hit them and get away. And even when you're looking at something like Kyokushin, which sort of blended that idea with the Irikumi Go, the hard inside fighting of Goju-kai, it's still mostly striking, and definitely very little grabbing. Generally, in most of those formats, you're allowed to grab for 2 seconds, and that's about it. Whereas in Kakedameshi, we're going to be grabbing the entire time, right? Because I want to maintain contact. So even if I'm going to punch you, I'm going to grab onto you with one hand and I'm going to punch you with the other hand, right?
Oh, yeah.
And being at that distance, being forced to always have a point of contact with your partner, and then emphasizing in your training that this is more than a kickboxing match, right? We teach you all these other techniques besides strikes. This is your opportunity to use them.
So this sounds a lot like Randori, which is a large part of our black belt grading and syllabus. But I like the adding the condition for like for the competitive element of having the hand on the other person. Last night, we were doing randori in the adult class with one of my fellow black belts, and he went to the ground and he choked me and was fully within the range of what we do. And I think if someone had walked in, it would have been like, this doesn't look like TV karate, you know. They weren't all at a distance. There was no like flip over kicks. I had the kids after the finale of Cobra Kai asking when we were going to learn the tornado kick and the flying kick. I was like, not if you want to pass your grading, sir. Let's just fix the my gearing before we get to your spinning round kick. I really, really love that idea. And I think my questions are going to see me implement it. So, what's your window? I see you've got your weapons on the wall there behind you. But I see in some of your videos you've got awesome looking chi. Tell me about your favorite Hojo implement and why.
My favorite is definitely the chi for sure. And for those who are unfamiliar, the chi, which is short for chikara ishi or power stone, generally call it a stone mallet because that's closer to visually what it looks like. It's a stone or concrete weight on the end of a stick. Right? Very, very simple. You can make it for $1. But the fact that it's cheap and easy to make means that it's very accessible. Pretty much anyone can make one. So it's a really easy way to get yourself into Hojo Undo, which is supplementary training for those who don't know the definition, right? And it's a very versatile tool. Because of the way leverage works, right? You can adjust the difficulty by where you grab on the handle. The closer you grab to the weight, the lighter it feels. The farther away you grab, the heavier it feels. You can move through many different kinds of movement patterns with it. You can make them heavier and just focus on the strength aspect. You can coordinate your breathing with these things. There's just a lot of different exercises that you can do to keep things fresh, keep them from getting boring. And yeah, you can just do all manner of different exercises with it. Kettlebells or ishisashi, stone locks, are also good. But yeah, my favorite is definitely the chi.
I'd also have to say Chishi's my number one. We actually teach it with the kids. We have a 500 gram, which is like a 1 pound. It's like a little mini plate weight on a stick. And it teaches them the responsibility of using a tool, much like at some point you have to learn how to use a knife, teaching them how to use the Chishi safely, working on their core strength, their shikadachis, teaching them how to look after dojo equipment. I absolutely love the Chishi. And then our range in our dojo goes from the 500 grams, which is 1 pound, right up to we have a 24 pound, 12 kilogram Chishi, which only like 3 people in the dojo are strong enough to use. But I'm a massive fan of Chishi and of Hojo Undo in general. And I think that's one of the great gifts given to us over essentially the centuries, alongside the Makiwara. I think me and the Makiwara have a love-hate relationship. Congo Ken, wonderful implement, but I don't think it's as versatile as a Chishi. The weight stays the same. You can't really adjust the weight, and they're very difficult to come by. You could make your own. I've seen people make their own with conduit and sand or conduit and cement. But to have a true heavyweight Congo cane, I think, is very, very difficult. And it's inaccessible for most practitioners.
Chi is very easily accessible. Kongo Ken is not. Kongo Ken, of course, for those who don't know, is a big iron loop or steel loop. Generally, you're going to make it out of 1.5 to 2 inch diameter steel tubing. And it's usually filled with sand, steel bearings, something to add weight to it. I have 2 of them. I have one that I made out of PVC and cement. And then one that I got from a dojo that closed that is proper steel tubing, but it is hollow, so it's not super heavy. And you're right, not terribly versatile either. It's a good tool. If you have one or want to make one, I encourage people to do so, but I would say that that's definitely further down the line than making chi-ishi. But yeah, Hojo Undo is one of those things that a lot of modern karateka don't do. And there is still this idea that, lifting weights is going to make you bulky and slow and inflexible for a lot of people, which is not true. I
Yeah.
think that's been debunked thoroughly for a long time now, but there are still people who are kind of telling their students that, and that gives people this idea.
Also, it
And
puts
a lot of
women
people
off
just,
because, like they become bulky, which is not true either.
yeah. Well, I mean, a lot of people underestimate the difficulty of building muscle as well. That they act like you're going to get bulky like this on accident, but it's not an easy thing to put on that amount of muscle anyway. And you are going to get way more benefit out of strength training than you are not strength training. It's going to improve your karate, and it's part of the tradition of karate to do these strength and conditioning exercises. Um, you know, if you're not doing Hojo Endo, are you really doing traditional karate? Because you've
Yeah,
dropped
it's a
an
good question.
entire segment of the art.
It's a quick way when you walk into a dojo to see how traditional they are. There's no Congo Kens, there's no Makiwara, there's no Chishi. I mean, that's fine. You can be a super kumite focused dojo. I mean, if you're teaching good karate and people love karate and benefit, great. But you can't really call yourself traditional Okinawan karate do. You can't put that on the door, but not have a single Chishi inside. Um,
Yeah.
so the funny thing is, South Africa is oddly a Goju stronghold outside of Okinawa. We've got some of the highest ranked Goju women and men outside of Okinawa in South Africa because during the 70s and 80s and 90s, it was very affordable for us to bring instructors over here for months at a time. And they would love to come here. The sun, we have a very big meat eating culture. Um, just the way we host. So they would really love to come here. And so we ended up developing this really strong Goju Ryu community, as well as an incredibly strong Shotokan community as well. We're talking hundreds of dojos, hundreds of Shotokan dojos in South Africa alone. Goju has very strong lineage here. And I think one of the things is that we are trying to preserve. So we started our YouTube channel as a lockdown thing because I had something to give our students while we couldn't teach them. But also what it's become is a way to preserve knowledge. So as I'm sure you've seen, my husband trained the Sensei Noah, and we're trying to preserve his teachings. I mean, the internet could disappear. That's why books are better. But it's so much easier to make a video than to write a book and get it published. Um, and leading into that, my next question for you was, as a karate and martial arts content creator, um, what do you hope will be your contribution, and what have you found in your journey creating online? Um, Obviously, we are now the vanguard of this, kind of leading karate's. I've been thinking about this a lot. Feminism's had a second, and now we're kind of in our third wave. And I feel like karate is now about to enter another wave. It was born everyone can argue about when it was born. And then I had a second wave when it left Okinawa and it left Japan. And I think now we're heading into a third wave with incredible hyper spreading. Now anyone can put out content, but not anyone can call each other out. I think that's one of the things that maybe the worst thing for dojos now is that you can be called out. People can need Google reviews. But like my husband was telling me, in the 80s, you could get away with terrible karate because it was only really word of mouth and newspaper ads, and no one could afford a TV ad. But now, so we're living in this very fragmented, very hyper-stimulated, for lack of a better word, like it's just so noisy. And as content creators, I feel like we do have a duty to produce good quality content that is accurate and educational. But you and I know, like, we're not creating particularly clickbaity content. I mean, I was going through your library. There's more content there than I can eat in a lifetime. And there's so much I want to learn. But, you don't have the viewers you deserve. You should be at 50, 60,000 subscribers. But we're not producing like super polished, clickbaity content. But I think we both have a role to play in that. How do you see your karate, the online, your legacy, and what you hope to leave and what you hope to create, and what example you're hoping to set, and especially in the very wild, wild west of American karate?
Well, my main thing is just trying to help more people understand and have access to the broader scope of what karate is. Right?
Mhm.
My late sensei and I co-created a YouTube series called Waza Wednesday, which was very popular while we were doing it. That ran for about 3 years. And the whole idea that we had behind that was, well, people have this particular idea of what karate does. And we know different. We know it's not just long range kickboxing. So let's show people what it does. And we mostly focused on bunkai. We did some hojo undo things here and there. We did some sport fighting things here and there, but we mostly focused on kata application. And his idea was he just wants more people to learn what karate is really like. And I very much took after that mentality. So, having more engagement is great. Having more followers is great because it helps more people get that content and have access to that sort of knowledge, because that's just not necessarily available everywhere in person. Because like I mentioned earlier, with the popularity of the McDojo format, most of the schools that people have easy access to, they're not really all that traditional. Or if they are, they've got a very narrow idea of what karate is because they've really only experienced what they do and not what other people do. And I also try to highlight the things that we have in common across different styles, as well as the things that we have distinctly different and unique, because there's value in both of those things. I think to say all karate is the same is obviously wrong, right? There's a lot of uniqueness and sort of different flair to different systems. But at the same time, we have a lot of things in common. And so we can celebrate the things we have in common and share the things that we don't, and it'll enrich everyone's experience. And that's really what I hope to help people do. And that's why I put out content that's not only, technique focused on, how to do things, how to interpret kata, but also things related to history and the philosophy of the art, because it is so much more than just how to fight.
The
But
fighting
yeah,
is important, but it's not the whole of the thing.
exactly. Like it is a martial art. You should be learning how to fight. You should be learning how to fight for a particular context. And if we are following the original intentions of karate, then those contexts should be self-defense, law enforcement, and security. Those are the things karate was designed for. So if you're training for something else, that's fine, but recognize that that's not the intent of karate. You are doing something else with it. And, like I said, if that's what you want to do, that's what you want to do. But there is a distinction between modern karate systems that are teaching you to compete, for example, versus classical karate systems that are trying to teach you how to successfully defend yourself or arrest somebody or protect someone. And you can have crossover between those things. But you have to understand everything and where it came from to be able to effectively communicate that, teach that, and have your students get out of the training what they're meant to get out of it.
It actually leads me around to you as a sensei and as an instructor. So we teach in our dojo, we have an incredible range from 5-year-olds, which is the youngest we'll take, and then right through to our oldest student is 68. And the difficulty is, adjusting and scaling Ojiri up and down depending on who we're teaching. Like for the little ones, we don't teach them randori because we can't tell them, well, you can use a fish hook and then they have to go and fish hook their friend's mouth. Well, now we get some getting them to their finger button. But we also want to teach, how do you gouge someone's eyes out? Because yes, it's in the kata, and and the chokes and everything that's there. And so leading with that, um, do you think that this movement towards, I've seen a couple of videos now, I'm not going to mention names because some people don't need the clout, of that karate takes too long to learn. Whereas I'm more like, how long is a piece of string? Because who are you teaching? This idea that it takes 5 years to get a black belt, or it takes 2 years to get a black belt. it doesn't make sense considering that if you are teaching karate as holistically as we are, because we are not here to produce elite athletes. Those days, the dojo had its stage where my husband was a phenomenal coach, but those days are gone. And the dojo has grown since then because some people come to karate because of the vibes. There are people here just for vibes. They love it here. It's great. They're not going to be black belts. They just want to come and have fun and see their friends and kick a few things. And then we've got students with cerebral palsy and dyspraxia. We've got adults who are just stepping onto the mat in their 30s and 40s. We have teenagers who are full of of vim and vigor. We also just want to smash something. So how do you how do you mold karate for your students? Like, what is your teaching principles that leads how you teach karate and share karate?
I always try to make sure that the way that I'm teaching people is suited to them personally. That's easier when you have fewer students, obviously. The larger your classes are, the less individualized you can make it. But I do try to maintain an awareness of my students' limitations and their preferences and their goals. That goals are one of the things that I talk to my students about before they ever start, because I want to make sure that what they want to get out of martial arts is something that I can give them. If they're wanting to, compete in the WKF in the Olympics someday, I'm not the guy. So you have to have that conversation. And not all potential students know to ask about that or to even think of their goals. They just think, oh, I want to do karate or whatever. But you mentioned some people suggesting that karate takes too long to learn. Um, and it's interesting for people to say that because at the same time, karate takes too long to learn, but karate gives out black belts too easy. That is a
So,
very
so which one
popular,
is it?
right? Um, and the reason that they have that perspective is because they they sort of misunderstand what black belt ranks are in karate versus what they are in something like BJJ. And BJJ has really influenced people's perspective on belts since it became popular. So they've got this idea that a black belt is like you've become a master at using this art on people,
Yeah, you're a
because that's how
killing
BJJ
machine.
uses it. You know, that's how judo uses it as well. That's not how it originally used it because it just created the black belt as the Kano sensei can throw you. You know how to break fall, black belt. But
Exactly.
it became,
The students know who to ask for help. That's basically why he started it, because he dojoed from 50 to 120 overnight. He's like,
yep,
you wear a black belt, you wear a black belt. Everyone asks these two if you need anything, and these are my okays. And we've kind of mysticized and romanticized what the black belt means, rather than it being, you are a master of basics. Now we're opening the karate buffet. Now you can start learning more because now you've mastered enough basics that you can actually be trusted not to hurt yourself or someone else. But you're right. It's both like this incredibly rarefied thing that only super strong, super incredible athletes have, or it's something that 10-year-olds are running around with, when the truth is somewhere in the middle.
yeah. And that's the thing with the black belt is that in Japan and Okinawa, a black belt in karate is no big deal. In most kids who graduate high school will have a black belt in either karate or judo, because those are popular PE programs and clubs that they have, and they'll get it in 3 years because it's really only meant to represent, okay, you've learned all the basics of the system. You've got a solid understanding of how to move like we move. So here's your black belt. Now you can actually start getting in depth, start learning more details, and so on. And then that got taken to the West after World War II, and completely flipped around to be something mystical because these GIs spent 6, 9, 12 months on Okinawa or in Japan and were given a black belt in that amount of time, with the understanding that they'd, come back and keep training, which some of them didn't do. But yeah, they got this black belt in 6 months to a year. But it's going to take them 4 years before they can get back to Okinawa. So they need to drag this out. And so they start telling their students that it takes this long and it's this difficult thing. And that's really why that got inflated, was so that these people who got their black belt in a super fast way can make themselves look better. Hey, it takes 5 years to get a black belt, but I did it in one. And then you also have the fact that they needed to stretch out this curriculum to bridge the gap between their visits to Japan. And uh, there, there's always going to be a change in the way things are perceived over time. And like it or not, BJJ has influenced that too. And so
Oh, very strongly.
yeah, it's made the black belt this representation of mastery, which is not
But
what
even
karate
blue
is.
and purple belts have become like hardcore because of BJJ. I'm like, no, man, kids have blue belts. Like,
Yeah.
for us.
Well, and on the flip side though, there is something to be said for the effectiveness of a practitioner in a certain amount of time, because that's the part where people are saying, karate takes too long to learn. So yeah, it takes too little time to get a black belt, but it takes too long of a time to become a good fighter, is the thought process, right? Because most people will say, oh, well, you can go train Muay Thai for 9 months and beat a black belt in karate in a fight. Well, some of them you can, not all of them. Yeah, but there is something to be said for the fact that many karate curriculum are fairly large and they are purposely distributed across a large number of ranks and meant to take a decent amount of time to learn. And a lot of these schools also focus so much on the aesthetics of making it look correct,
Very
rather
correct.
than the function of making it work correctly. Whereas if you're looking at something like BJJ or judo, their measure of your proficiency is your ability to use the art on another person. Whereas the measure of proficiency in karate is very often how good it looks, um, which is
How
not,
beautiful your character.
yeah, how clean is your kata, how sharp or are your kihon, but that does not that does not actually equate to the ability to use the art. That's where the disconnect is. So you've got a black belt that means less than a black belt in BJJ. But at the same time, by the time someone earns their black belt in karate, they maybe have the applicable knowledge of somebody with much less experience in another art because of the way that a lot of modern karate is taught.
I know.
And I can't fault them for that belief, because that is a popular experience for people in karate. They've experienced that strip mall McDojo, and or even a traditional school, but it's a traditional modernized system like Shotokan, where their exposure to the broader curriculum of karate is going to be limited, no matter how legitimate the style of Shotokan is, or the organization they're in. It can be very solid, legitimate. Yeah, it can be very solid, legitimate Shotokan, but you have to understand that Shotokan removed the grappling material intentionally from karate, and they invented long range karate that did not exist. And most of them have dropped hojo undo as well, right? Um, and so the type of karate experience you have in Shotokan is very different from what you have in Goju Ryu or Shorin Ryu, even though
See?
they're related.
Yeah, I mean, they're cousins. At one point, they all came from the same family tree. But, like cousins, they go off on their own journeys. And, one of the other things, and I don't think a lot of people know this history, is there was a very political decision when karate was starting to become exported as a soft power, as a kind of soft export from Japan, that karate wouldn't really tread on the toes of jiu-jitsu. So there would be this is the grappling one, this is the striking one, and never shall the twain meet, because it's easier to export very simple things. And they were like, it's okay, the people at home back now, but let's see what we send to the Gaija. And, visiting Okinawa was a bit like going to Mecca. And I love it. And I can't wait to go back. I absolutely adore Okinawa, the people, the karate, the dojos. It's much more relaxed than I thought it would be because we have a very, because of, again, the strong sort of kind of influence on all karate in South Africa, we can be very Japanese, more Japanese than the Japanese. You know, this obsession with like line and strictness and, you know, you must be on time and to be late is death. And, you know, and then when we arrived to Okinawa, they're like, class starts at like 8:30-ish, you know, like we weren't expecting that. It was so lovely to see them slow down and, but also you could see the longevity. They train for longevity. They train I mean, but you also see 80-year-olds like hitting a makiwara and that thing bends over because they've trained. And that's what I think a lot of these other arts are forgetting and not seeing. Karate is not, karate is for life. For me, it's for life. Not for everyone. I agree. Some people can be like a 6-month chapter in their life. They go to a strip dojo, they go to the wrong dojo, and they just have a bad experience. And that's it for them. Or they're with us for 5 years, but they move away, or they get injured, or life changes, and parents get divorced. You know, you only have that time with them. Okay, so like the 3% of us for whom karate is a livelihood, a way of life, um, a way of expressing ourselves. For me, my kata is my feminine expression of myself. I hate dancing. I'll die before I dance in public, but I'll do kata on the internet. Um, I think that a lot of people don't see karate for the longevity that you can train for a long time and be strong and have that also the mental strength and the midline crossing and building gray matter. I think that's something that we like to emphasize on our channel. You know, people are like, wow, she punch sand and punch rocks. I'm like, why? Let's involve my knowledge worker. These hands go. I can't run the business. I can't be punching sand and rocks and have my fingernails going black and forth and off. Like, you know, I
Yeah.
did that once with ultraman running and my toenail fell off and I hated it. You know, once was enough. But I think part of what we get to do as content creators is very, yes, sometimes it sucks to be a person on the internet because everyone has an opinion on the internet and opinions are like assholes. Everyone has one and mostly they're full of shit. But part of the education that we get to do is telling people actually karate is so much more than what you've seen on TV, on WKA. That random dojo is doing demonstrations down at the mall. Like it's such a beautiful, multifaceted art. And I love that your dojo badge has got the Shuhari translated into English. So for our viewers, um, I love that choice. Tell us about it.
So Shuhari is an educational concept, essentially, of the process of how someone learns something. Um, you've got the shu phase, which is the copy or protect phase of learning. You are going to do something exactly as you've been shown. You are going to copy, essentially, what you're being shown and do it exactly that way. A really easy way to look at this is when you're learning to write. They've got, you know, the paper with the lines on it, and you're supposed to, there's a A written on the paper, you write an A and try and make it match, right? That is the shu phase, the copy or protect phase. You're protecting the tradition by learning it exactly as it's being shown to you. Then we go into the ha phase, which is the phase of evolution and adaptation, alteration, right? This is where you make it your own, in a sense. You figure out the ways that work better for you and give it your own flair. So this is when you have developed your own signature handwriting style, right? Um, and then we go from shu and ha into ri, which is the transcend phase. This is the phase where you're actually creating your own material in a sense. And you are extrapolating from what you've learned to come up with new things. And that doesn't fit the handwriting analogy quite as well because it just gets more into the language, right? And as you go through and you're writing naturally, sometimes you'll do a cursive letter when you meant to do a print letter, and you'll change the grammar of a sentence to make it more your own. There are more linguistics involved because it's a more natural thing to you. It's just something you do at that point, and it comes from an innate sense of understanding. And
So
this process is something you can apply universally to anything that you're learning. Um, but I find that a lot of people mistakenly look at Shuhari as a linear process that happens over the course of your entire martial arts career. So they'll say things like, oh, for the first 5 years of your training, you're in the shu phase, you're copying exactly. And then for the next 5 years, you're in the ha phase. And then the next five, you go into the re phase. And that's just not how it works. The shu ha re process is a continual cycle that you go through as you learn more about what you're doing. If you think about something you learned early on, you initially copied it and did exactly as you were told, and then you kind of figured out your own way of doing it that felt better for you, and then you started extrapolating from that and doing more things with it. And then usually at some point you circle back around because somebody gives you a correction or a new idea or asks a new question, and you completely reevaluate everything. And it's something that you do with everything you learn, not just over the course of your career, but with every single component of learning.
that's really the best way of putting it. That we think, I saw one metaphor. We think it's a circle, but actually it's more like a spiraling staircase. That we keep refreshing and going over our knowledge. And when I explain to the kids Shuhari, it's like, you know, when one becomes cake boss immediately, you started making cookies. Then once you can make cookies, then we can graduate to cakes. And eventually, when you're really good, you can be like Heston Blumenthal or that crazy, the guy who makes amazing things out of chocolate. I'm sure you've seen his shorts on YouTube. He's got
Yeah.
a Netflix series called School Chocolate. The stuff he comes up with is incredible. That's someone who's still working with the same materials everyone else. He's working with chocolate, but he is doing things with chocolate that normal people cannot conceive of. He is so far into read that he's gone off into the horizon, and he's setting and creating a new standard in a new school. But most of us, and then here comes the question: when are you allowed? Because there's also this other problem now with this very conservative and rigid kind of structure that we've unfortunately inherited. I don't know how much in America, but in South Africa is very much like you must stay within these blocks or you're going to upset someone. And that's as much as I'm going to say, well, I'm going to get into big trouble. But like, I've been doing karate for 20 years now. When do I get to have my signature and my stamp? If not after 20 years, when? But I still get, kind of trimmed back into line because this is the one true way instead of, well, when does it get to be my karate? Expressing my body and my wonky hips, but also my flair and my understanding. So again, the contention and the difficulty of a very hierarchical structure comes back
Yeah.
into play here.
I was lucky in that my late sensei was very big on trying to get his students to be better than him. That was that was
That's the
his
one.
that was his goal, right? He wanted his students to be better and more knowledgeable than he was. Um, None of us got there before he passed away, but that's what his goal was. And he encouraged all of us to try to find our own interpretations and our own adaptations for things as we would go along. And he would give advice. He'd see us working on something and trying things out, and he'd be like, okay, well, if you tweak this way, if you adjust this, that might work better for you. Try it out. And he guided us through that process, but he encouraged us to constantly be figuring things out for ourselves. So that was something that not everybody gets in their karate experience. And America tends to be a very individualistic society, and there is a big emphasis on just the individual doing the best for the individual. But when it comes to traditional karate, a lot of people have maintained a more Japanese structure to that, especially because so many of the people who brought it were military. So they also are used to that rigid structure of the military. And so um, a lot of them do not really give you the room to ask the questions and figure out your own interpretations of things. So it can be pretty hit or miss, but I would say that a lot of, especially the older dojo that have been around for decades, are more likely to have that mentality. And a lot of them are more along the lines of, well, you can start making it your own after you're a fifth dan
Yeah,
or a seventh
that's
dan.
kind of yeah, that's when you get to be a real martial artist. It's only when you've done your time, paid your metaphorical school fees, how many black belts produced, have you done any research? And absolutely, but there's also some people who just want to do karate until they die and be happy doing that, and that's fine. There has to be more, there have to be more pathways for people in karate. If you try to create more instructors, not very few people are cut out to be instructors. Yeah, but no, I know you've got a private lesson coming up, and I've so enjoyed talking to you. And I know I might have to let you go sometime soon, but I just want to say that I love the work you're doing, and I'm grateful that we live in an age where there are practitioners like you who are flying the flag for traditional karate. And I think that's also another reason why we need this third wave. We need a new generation of fresh blood, bringing new ideas into karate, better ways to teach karate, better ways to preserve students' health and student welfare, how we can run our dojos, how we can help everyone feel like they have a place on the mat under the sun. And I think you're doing an amazing job of leading that charge. And keep up your amazing work. For what it's worth, from a random third down from South Africa. I love your work, and I really hope to keep seeing you produce content.
Thank you very much. I appreciate you having me on.
Awesome. Um, Everyone, I will put all of Noah's links in the description. He's got a huge prolific library of videos to watch, keep you company. He's got books as well, which I'll also link to. And I hope that we will maybe have another conversation like this again. I still have some things we can chat about. And we'll definitely do it again, and we'll do it soon. Noah, thank you so much for your time. Arigatou gozaimasu from all the way from a very dark, cold winter's evening. Um, Wishing you all the best, and good luck with all your private lessons to come and for your karate until I meet again online.
Thank you very much.
Fantastic. Cheers. It's been so lovely talking to you.
You too.
Ta-ta. Let's find this to stop happening.